Here we have our magnetosphere, and we see this impact of the geomagnetic storm, the solar storm come in, triggering this geomagnetic storm. We're looking at the equatorial plane. Look at how the density just increases. This is our density model here. Maybe it was good to chill for 30 minutes because now there's a lot of people in the chat, so that's awesome. Welcome all. We are right now in a G3 storm, very unexpectedly, according to official space weather forecasters. I thought this was going to maybe not G3, but I thought we had a significant geomagnetic storm. Look at that come in. Really just waves of energy coming in from the sun. This is our south-north plane, and so you can just see them just piling in and causing this big increase in the pressure on Earth's magnetic field. And as a result, these big fluctuations in the field strength, these big energy fluctuations across the globe, and as a result, within us. And so some of the common symptoms of this are, for example, like headaches, fatigue, restlessness, pain in places that you typically might have pain. Let's say you had a surgery or something like that. That can be, you can get a pain flare-up. Some people can even, like, for example, have like skin breakouts and things of this nature. Digestive issues is a really big one. It throws off all the peristaltic activity of your smooth muscle contractions of your intestines. So you may notice some big changes to your gut health as a result of this. And another thing that's not often talked about with geomagnetic storms is that the energy of the background magnetic field paired with the Schumann resonances can lead to viral growth. And so that's why some people will often get sick during a geomagnetic storm. And one of the other factors too that, if we're being truthful and honest here, is that people that have any sort of long COVID issue, or they receive multiple jabs, right? They have that now, that spike protein now being produced within them, that can cause a long COVID flare-up. And I say that not based on any particular scientific research paper, though there are plenty out there. It's just really based on a lot of commenters that I've seen, and also just looking at different sources. And there's a really good correlation between people having all of a sudden this extreme fatigue because of like long COVID flaring up during a geomagnetic storm. And so it's worth mentioning. We can look at let's look at our HP 30 index to see this geomagnetic storm. It's really brutal. And so if you want to learn how to kind of detox from that, the chat that I had yesterday with David and Bella with Quantum Planet World is really great. People really love that chat. We go into all this stuff. It's kind of out there. So let me refresh this. Not that. Let me refresh this. Mercury retrograde, folks. Woo-wee. Wowza. Okay, here's our HP 30 index. And so you see that we were at nice, calm levels, right? We were chilling. Everything was good. We just got off of that G4 storm. People were finally starting to feel all right and to recover and for their circadian rhythm to normalize and sleep cycles to normalize and all this stuff. And then all of a sudden, boom, we're back into G3, really quickly ramped up. And we hit these values there. That is 7.33. And then these ones are 6.67. And so that's 2 hours where we were at G3 storming. And then if you factor in these other ones, we were at a KP index, a 3-hour measure of 6.67. And so that's also, just on the edge of G3. And so really quickly came out of nowhere. Yeah, if you have any metal implants, that can be affected by this and triggered and often pain as a result. So really quite significant geomagnetic storm coming out of kind of nowhere. We can look at our geospace delta B map to see that change. It showed it a little nicer earlier because this was showing the pre-storm and then the storm conditions. But we'll still see this big shift once our time resets. You'll see that it's kind of low at the beginning in the colors, and then it'll quickly go to red up in the high latitude region. So here's the shift. And so we see this pulse of red activity there really getting strong. That's where the strongest energy fluctuations are, in the high latitude regions. Here we see our legend. So 0 means that there are very minor field fluctuations, and then 100, 200, 300, 400 very strong field fluctuations. And that's really significant to get a 400 nanotesla swing. So only during the big storms, G3, G4, G5, do you get these 400 nanotesla swings, 500 nanotesla, even in some places like close to the north and south magnetic poles, 1,000 nanotesla swings. Really significant. Now, if we look at Earth's magnetic field as a whole, the field strength in the polar regions is stronger. North Pole, if you want to average it, about 60,000 nanotesla. South Pole, about 65,000 nanotesla. So even a 1,000 nanotesla swing isn't much if you compare it to the total strength of the field, but it's much more than 10 nanotesla, which is like a typical pulsation, you could say. And so you can think of Earth's magnetic field almost like an ocean. And so you have these waves at the top, but the ocean depth overall is quite large. But still, these waves at the top are significant as it relates to ourselves, our bioelectricity, our metabolism. It alters all the different things in our body, going from DNA, because DNA is conductive, so this induces different electric currents in DNA and also electric currents within cells, and changes cellular voltage gradients and changes proteins and their shape, and as a result how they interact and trigger different connector receptors and things. Ion channels can be influenced to open up or to close up, influencing those cellular voltage gradients, which are responsible for how DNA and cells work together. What proteins does DNA produce? And what phenotype is the cell? That's what we look at if you research into morphogenetics. And so like the base of your biology, your ability to repair, regenerate, and heal is altered by these energies. Now, how significantly? That's the big question. But it really depends on your individual state also. And so that is a big factor in all this. It's like, are you kind of immune to this because you're young and healthy and you're mindful of your health? Or are you more susceptible to these swings because you are, let's say, you just happen to get injured, or you do have some chronic disease or things of that nature, or you got 5 jabs or whatever. All these things are very impactful. And that's just the reality that we have to deal with. The sun is bringing this information to us and triggering often these very visceral felt experiences through our body, which is our consciousness temple, so we can then work with the truth and undergo that consciousness evolution journey and to proceed and do the things that we need to be healthy, to be well, to be a good community member, to make a good impact on the planet, to be able to pursue our passion and our life, soul purpose, life mission, and to go forward. And so this is just one small component of that entire puzzle as I see it. And so, there's a lot of different scenarios that were at play over the past 4 or 5 years, and those are going to continue coming up. This information is all the National Oceanic Space Weather Prediction Center website. So you go and just type in NOAA on Google, space weather, and it'll pop right up, and then you can learn to navigate through here. Now, this is all because of the solar wind, effectively. So we'll do a little short course on the solar wind. Let's zoom out to the 7-day. And so here we have 7 days of solar wind data. And what we're looking at is effectively interplanetary space and the energetic properties of interplanetary space out at the Lagrange point. Basically, you have the sun, you have the Earth, and 1% of the distance to the sun from the Earth, you have this kind of gravity neutral zone where you can park a satellite and it'll stay there. That's the Lagrange point. So we sent a satellite there, the Discover satellite, and it's just chilling there, and it has all these different probes, and it's just measuring the energetic quality of space in that location. Now, space is not neutral, it has a lot of things in it. The sun is always pumping out solar wind, and so it's effectively measuring the solar wind. But at times, solar storms pass through, causing big changes to the energetic properties of space, and then those eventually hit us here on Earth. So this gives us about a 1 hour lead time. What we see here is about 1 hour in advance. Other than the KP index, everything is effectively 1 hour in advance. It's the geomagnetic storm. We're in a G3 storm. This affects technology, right? This affects power grids and power systems. That's one of the big worries with these things, is that it can trigger a power grid collapse, technological issues. And like one of the big storms that we had back in, I think it was the one back in May, we had like a whole bunch of cell networks that went out. and they blamed it on something else. They're like, oh no, it wasn't the storm. It's like, okay, when it quacks like a duck and it walks like a duck and it looks like a duck and it's eating like a duck and it has the little ducklings falling behind it, it's a duck, okay? Like there are these clear technological effects from these geomagnetic storms, and that is not to be underestimated. Now, whether that was my phone actually being affected by this or not, I don't know. But that's never happened before. I've never had that happen before during any sort of live stream or video that I've made. Yeah, okay. So we had this big G4 storm, and what I was talking about earlier, and what you didn't see or hear, is that this was this big push of awakening for us. A lot of people felt these symptoms. They were wondering what it was, but a lot of people didn't know that it was caused by the sun, by the geomagnetic storm. There was some awareness that was pushed out as a result of that, some education that was given to people. You know, we're slowly building awareness and education, not just me, lots of people with this. Over time, you know, we are a group community that's sharing and disseminating this reality and truth to people, which is really quite amazing. So thank you all. This was a big push, all in advance of the really powerful full moon that we have coming up, where every single planet is in some critical aspect. So all the inner planets going to the outer planets all the way out to Uranus are in a geometric alignment of some sort. And then the two outer planets beyond that, Neptune and Pluto, are at critical degrees. So they're also very much in this conversation. It's a sign, Stefan, be nice to me. So now we've had a little bit of an integration period after the G4 storm. A lot of people have learned about this stuff, right? A lot of people learned what they maybe perhaps needed to do positively to impact their life so they can handle those energies better, what they perhaps need to reduce from their life, cut out from their life. Whether this is something as simple as, let's say, drinking too much coffee or drinking alcohol. That's the real, that's no good for your health at all from the research. Or people, like, you know, positive relationships, positive community events that are, you know, help you to just feel good, right? And they lift you up, or, you know, toxic ones. That's a big conversation that people have in general, is our relationships with people. Venus is in this aspect for this full moon. Now we have this coming back up again. So we have this G3, so far not as strong, but it is definitely reactivating all this. And some people are just now recovering from that G4 in terms of their circadian rhythm, their sleep cycles, inflammation, pain, fatigue. And so this G3 hopefully does not last long, but it is saying right before the full moon, it's giving that second jolt of awakening to say, hey, here's what we really need to focus on. This is what I believe. This is what I present on. And so there was some other data I wanted to show. Oh yeah, I want to zoom in on this because this is actually really interesting. We don't see this so nicely so often. Now we're zoomed in on this storm. And what you'll see is that our velocity and our density jumped up to really high values, specifically density. We were in normal conditions here, 323 for our velocity. This is kilometers per second. Well, that's actually already in there. About 1 to 2 to 3. This is particles per square centimeter for the density of the solar wind. But then we have this double pulse. And so you have the first coronal mass ejection impact right there. And then you have the second one right there. I said there was 2 in earlier videos. In fact, there were 2 solar storms, not just 1. Thank you, Trisha, for the super thanks. And then we see our density actually spiked up to like 55, 56, 50. So we had a nearly 50x increase, like 30, 40, 50x increase in the density of the solar wind as it relates to ions and plasma, things of that nature. So like tremendous increase in the plasma density. Velocity went up too. It was a storm faster than expected. They forecast this to come in on the 18th, actually came in on the 17th. NASA did forecast it for the 17th, but it was NOAA that forecasted it as being slower velocity, lower density, and coming in on the 18th. So it's here, it's right now, it's happening, and we had this big G3 pulse, as you can see right there. Let me step over here. Thank you, Taco2222. Amazing. What beautiful numbers. Yeah, recovering from the last storm over until the eclipse. Well, I was doing some research into 2025, and it's not to be underestimated. Like the rest of 2024, 2025, and 2026 isn't just like theater or a rodeo. This is like really big, world-changing things that are going to occur. And that assessment, I may be wrong. That assessment, though, is based off of extremely similar astrology that we had 800 years ago, about 800 years ago. And so I'm going to make a video on that, but this is our warm-up for the marathon sprint that we have. So this is the time to do the work, folks, because once SHTF, right? Then there is like, you were in it. There's no like, oh, well, I need a second chance. Like, we're in it. So this is the time to do it. That is what I believe. That's what I present on, how we can use these energies to fuel our consciousness evolution journey, to be healthier, to expand into these other dimensions, to bring in new Earth. The reason why this is such a strong storm is you can see here, our interplanetary magnetic field strength got quite high. If we go here, there, it was 22 and like negative 21, negative 18. See it right there, negative 22. So really powerful injection of energy into our magnetosphere and plasmasphere as a result of this big solar storm impact. Two storms actually wedged up together, double impact. And so I think we may now be at the tail end of this, but it's just a quick jolt to the system. And pretty strong one going up to G3. We can go back to our HB30 index. And yeah, it looks like we're starting to come down now. I don't think that we're going to have a second pulse going back up to G3 levels, but we'll probably stay at this like G1 range for a while and then trickle down. But G3 is significant. On the category rating, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And so that G4 storm was very powerful. G3 is nothing to scoff at, and we had a 3-hour measure of that. And clearly, I think you all are feeling that because we have a very active live stream right now. So we'll do some questions in just a little bit. I want to show this big sunspot that we have rotating. Well, first, let's look at our sunspots. We've actually kind of been in a quiet period as it relates to solar activity for the past week or so, past 5 days since we had that storm. We really haven't had too many flares. I actually go over here to X-ray flux really quick. Here's our 3 days. You don't see any big spikes. As a result, we didn't really have any big flares, right? But we go back to our sunspots. There are still quite a lot of sunspots on the sun right now. And so this is still a factor. And we have some really big sunspots rotating in the next couple days, like really big sunspots. So here is 3784. We have these other ones here. I don't know the names yet. I haven't looked at the synoptic map, but this guy just rotated in, has this cluster. The leading front of it is this cluster and then a big core there, likely to grow and expand as it rotates through because that's what all the sunspots have been doing recently. They show up here and then they get bigger on the Earth-facing side. Don't ask me why. There just seems to be solar flux being pushed out on the Earth-facing side. And remember, Earth is rotating in its orbit too, which means that the Earth-facing side is always really kind of shifting in like the actual alignment position. So it seems to kind of be tracking the Earth. But in general, right now we're in solar maximum, very powerful period, tons of solar flux and energy being pushed out. And we see that nicely here and what we have coming up with our helioseismic map. Here's what we got on the sun right now. There's that cluster I mentioned. Now we have this guy rotating in. And so this is for the 16th. Now it's the 17th. So this is about a day out already in the past. But this big cluster here is going to be rotating into view on that eastern limb over the next 48 hours. And so then we're really going to be in it because this guy right here is the biggest sunspot cluster we've seen on the far side using helioseismic. We know the sunspots that rotated out, what they were, but they seem to have merged and combined and grown on their far side journey. And we saw some pretty significant flaring and mass ejections from them as well. So we'll see if that happens, but that's coming in right after this full moon, and then it'll be aligned and direct with us here in this zone on the 25th. So big energies there. We do have our Schumann resonances as well. I talked about this earlier before I accidentally I realized I wasn't actually live. But in general, what we're seeing as a result of this solar maximum period and other factors I'll get into is an increasing electrification of our planet. And so Schumann resonances, if you're unaware, they are naturally resonant wavelengths of light for our planet. The planet has a certain circumference. Light has a certain speed, right? You know, the speed of light is 300,000 kilometers per second. Circumference of the Earth is 40,000 kilometers per second. And so this creates a frequency that light likes to resonate at, which is about 7.5 hertz. When we actually measure it, it's more about 7.8 hertz. And so these frequencies, you see the Schumann resonances here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? This is 0 hertz, this is 40 hertz. I can actually blow this up a bit more for you all. These are always resonating as a result of a variety of energy inputs, lightning strikes, the sun ionizing the ionosphere, the uppermost atmosphere, releasing this energy outwards. Even things like meteors striking into the earth can be picked up in the Schumann resonances. Volcanoes, when the Hunga Tonga volcano exploded in 2022, that released a massive electrical impulse to the global electric circuit. And as a result, it showed up in the Schumann resonances. Huge energy just explosion on our planet as a result. And so these are so interesting because they overlap with our brain waves and our heart rhythms, both in terms of frequency and in power. Specifically, brain waves is where it's really interesting because there's increasing evidence that we connect to them, that we enter into coherence with them, and that we have an ability to transmit information into the Schumann resonances so they can be stored and also receive energy from them. And as a result, it's this collective consciousness. The idea, in theory, really, is that it's a collective consciousness information network that we are all connected to, that not only is active right now in the present, but because people have always been connected to that, because other sentient, intelligent, conscious beings have been connected to that, like whales, their energy and information from the past is also stored in it. So there are really interesting, profound experiences and downloads you can have as a result. And the part of our brain that pulses at Schumann frequencies, most specifically, is our temporal lobe, which deals with spatial awareness and the awareness of time and language. And so if you are, for example, in a dream state, if you wanted to have something turn into reality and to have this visual experience, but it's almost like VR, right? You would need it to interact with the temporal lobe to create that sense of space, time, and also language. And so that is how our temporal lobes, like these two antennas here on our side of our head, can interact with these energy fields and reconstruct these experiences from the past and information from the present as well. I've had those experiences. This is all hypothesis, but it's very compelling to me. I've had the raw, visceral experience of it. And so this is 100% what I believe. And I think the science is going to be very slow to catch up because it's such a, how do you even prove this? That's a difficult thing. Quack, quack. Yeah. So Schumann resonances are very active right now because of this geomagnetic storm, increasing the electrical activity on our planet as a result. And just in general, over time, as the Earth continues to have greater volatility in its energy systems, and we have more energy holding capacity as a result of greenhouse gases, water, methane, carbon dioxide, right? Water is the big one. We're going to have a stronger global electric circuit and stronger Schumann resonances. Now, in particular, some people don't believe in climate change, for example. Well, what we're seeing are higher highs and we're also seeing lower lows. And so we're seeing a polarization in our weather and in our temperature. Now, the easy way to understand this, as I see it, is that we had a whole bunch of atmospheric materials and elements, right? Water, carbon dioxide, methane, others, sequestered over millions of years into oil and gas, where they are basically inert geologically and atmospherically and all these things. You know, kilometers and kilometers down, a lot of them now with fracking, some of them were closer up, but they did not interact with our atmosphere in an active way, with our oceans in an active way. What we've done is we've extracted all that old material, which is, breaks down, once you combust it, breaks down to water and carbon dioxide and methane, and released it in mass into our atmosphere in the span of just 200 years. And so hundreds of millions of years of stored energy and karma has now been released onto our planet. And back then, we were in hothouse conditions. Earth's energy was much greater than it is now, and not necessarily in a good way. Like the Holocene period that we're in right now is very stable and in general good for us, like the interglacial period at least. But the hothouse period, things were crazy. Sea levels were way different. And so we've taken a lot of that. In general, we're seeing an increasing electrification of our planet. And a lot of people are having these visions and dreams of a planet that's just being scorched by electricity. I'm one of those people. I've had dreams of this over and over and over again, of just massive electrical activity on our planet. And they haven't been necessarily pleasant dreams. But that's just, hey, that's just me and my dreams. But yeah, a lot of activity there as well, as you can see. And what else did I want to show? I think that was basically it. We can do some questions now. So if you have any questions, please drop them in the chat with an @Stefan Burns, and I will answer them. And yeah, if you're jumping in now, then you can see these big magnetic fluctuations that are occurring as well. We do seem to be at a very critical moment. Biblical prophecy, I'm not sure. There's a lot of people have always said that, and they haven't been true. But there are always beginnings and endings. It's happening all the time. But 2025 and 2026 are really, really, really looking intense. And I'm going to make a video on that. So if you want to see that video, then you can subscribe and you'll be up to date in about probably a week's time. I need to do some really detailed research on this. I'm not just presenting fluff. Thank you, Kaylee, for the $2. Thank you so much. Currently driving across the country. Prayers up. Yeah, prayers to you. Prayers to everyone in here. Thank you all for being part of the live stream. I hope you're all feeling okay. I also wanted to mention some things that you can do to help. Like what I do for these geomagnetic storms. Just recently, I really like vetiver essential oil. Vetiver is really amazing, grounding. It's like luscious. It helps you to really deeply like kind of get into that parasympathetic state. So that's a really good essential oil if you don't have it already. And it's one of these deeper notes, and so it persists for a while. The aroma isn't like a citrus that just kind of goes off in like 20 minutes. You'll have that vetiver influence for hours, which is really nice. Also, based on the conversation and not live stream, but the conversation and video from yesterday, I picked up some St. John's wort, which I've used before as tea, but this is a tincture, and this is really great for just kind of stabilizing your energies of your third eye and crown chakra, which are activated during geomagnetic storms and in general with high solar activity. So St. John's wort, good for anxiety and depression as well, just for kind of like a base lift of your mood. That's something you can do. Again, water, breath work, yoga, grounding, earthing. I talk about that all the time. I don't need to beat a dead horse. First question is from Mr. C, who is my music teacher actually in high school. Do you think we will see a G5 from this big cluster coming up? If it flares and releases a very big solar storm our way, we very well could see a G5. Do I think it's going to happen? I would put more money in that pot than I would in the pot that says it's not going to happen. Just based on the astrology, it's being so critical, that could lead to and kind of manifest a really big geomagnetic storm. And around that time, August 25th, we're getting close to the fall equinox, right? The September equinox. That's when we have a greater connection with the solar wind to the earth. And so it's very possible. But it really has to flare. It has to show instability. Right now it hasn't, but it's big, it's mean. It looks, we'll see it once it's on the earth facing side. If it does any sort of significant flaring, X-flaring, then it's very likely we'll have a storm head our way if it's in that strike zone. Some other questions here. How strong of a storm would cause power outages? Do you think that'll happen? So I think our power systems are more resilient than a lot of people think, because we've had some big storms like that G5 and it didn't knock out power to the extent that some people were prophesizing. But you would need a big storm. You would need a G5 storm typically, but it really depends on also what the current kind of conditions of the power grid are and where you are. This is going to affect the higher latitudes to a much greater degree, because the geomagnetically induced currents up in, let's say, the northern latitudes or way down south are going to be much stronger than they are in the mid-latitude and equatorial regions. So you're almost unlikely to get a geomagnetic storm in Cairo. A power outage in Cairo due to a geomagnetic storm. But maybe up in Uppsala, Sweden, or Ottawa, or Quebec, or Vancouver, very possible. In New York, maybe. If it's strong enough, possible. But you need a strong storm. You need enough of these geomagnetically induced currents to overload certain systems, circuits, and just to totally break them apart, trip them and cause them to break. And then it's more a question of how fast can you repair it. If you have enough of these things break at one time, then it's a really big issue. Do you check your email? I do, but I can't respond to all of them, so that's why I may not respond to emails for anyone that's emailed me. Eliana, thank you for the $2.99. Thank you so much. God bless. Thank you for super thanks. And welcome to Soul Tribe, Craig. That's awesome. Another question. I'm in Australia. Do these storms affect the whole planet? They do, but they're strongest at these high latitude regions. So that's an important one to keep in mind. So someone's saying 7.4. Russia had a 7.4 earthquake. Let's give it a look, folks. Benefit of being live. USGS latest earthquakes. Wow. Whoa. I've been tracking this area too. It's been very interesting. Let's go to our ocean map because that's the one that I like. And I get this scaling down. Huge changes. This came in right with the G3. So is there a coincidence? That's, I don't believe in coincidence personally. But if we go back in time, what we've been seeing is we saw a 7.1 in Japan. We saw some 6.5s up here. We saw a high magnitude 5 in Taiwan, I believe, or it was like a 6.1 actually. I think it was like a magnitude 6 in Taiwan. And we've had more magnitude 5 earthquakes in Japan. So this entire region here has been super active. This line right there has just been absolutely going bonkers. And now we have this 7.4 in Russia. Let's zoom into it. Depth of 44 kilometers. And if we punch in, let's see if it was off the coast, just off the coast. And so this is just below that. That's as a result of this subduction zone because oceanic crust is fairly thin, but then you have this plate subducting down and there must have been some fracture there strong enough to trigger a 7.4. So that's pretty crazy. Now this quake was today at 12:10. It's 12:23. So our Schumann station that we have is located somewhere about here in Tomsk. And so we may see some pattern in the Schumann resonances as a result of this quake, but in general what we see is that we don't get a strong pattern and energy release into the Schumann resonances when these quakes are offshore because the water absorbs the energy. Water will absorb all this energy very easily. And so it has to also be fairly shallow and on land for us to often see this energy signature. So I don't think we'll see this in the Schumann feed, but we can check. I keep up on Campi Flegrei. It's pumping, it's doing its thing. Curious how these flares are changing chakras. Well, in general, flares will activate all the different chakras and they'll really open up the crown chakra. And so that's why having some sort of like protective kind of agent for the crown chakra, like St. John's wort, is so good. I just picked this up at Sprouts. I'm not recommending any specific company. This isn't like an advertisement. It's just these are things I like: vetiver, St. John's wort. So I can always tell when the solar storms are bad because it's one of the things that can disrupt my Astro A50. Yeah, so there's a variety of things that I think there's also, we have to recognize that some things are more sensitive than others. People, places, environments, things. Everything's going to react to energy differently. And so just keep that in mind when you're wondering why your cousin, for example, who's built like a F-150 never feels these things, but then you may be sobbing in the corner during the geomagnetic storm because you have this big emotional upheaval. We're all given different life paths and purposes and things, and this is also true for our possessions, our technology. Some things are, more, they've had more stress, and if you're taking your cell phone into the sauna, for example, maybe it's going to react more to these energy swings because this is in general more susceptible. Big 7.4 in Russia. And let's go to the 7-day view. Actually, let's go to the 30-day view, significant worldwide. Because now we can see what I was talking about. Here we have the Russia earthquake. And we can actually do, let's keep it newest first. Here's the 7.4 in Russia. There's the 6.1 in Taiwan. Here's the 7.1 in Japan, I believe. Yeah, there's the 7.1 Japan. And then also looks like we had, some big magnitude 6s in the Philippines back early in August. And so this whole line here has been active. You also see these magnitude 6s up in Russia here, just at the border of Japan. So this area has just been very active recently. And so there's a lot of people calling for, a big one in California, Cascadia zone, that region. Are we going to see a mirror of this activity then on this fault zone, the Pacific and the North American plate? Who knows? But we have had some interesting activity in California recently. We had this earthquake swarm in Lamont, California. The magnitude wasn't too high. It's only like magnitude 5, but there was a whole swarm. Then some other earthquakes that a lot of people felt in the LA basin. Some other quakes out here on the Garlock fault. But in general, you can see it's been quiet in North America as it relates to quakes as compared to Asia here. Really, really big quakes rocking. And it seems that the trend has turned around because we had this big reduction in earthquakes. And I've been tracking the daily earthquake numbers for about a week now, and we're back in that 30 to 35 range for daily earthquakes equal to or greater than magnitude 4. So that trend seems to have reversed where we were in this low, and now we're getting these big earthquakes. 7.4 is no joke. I mean, that is a very strong earthquake. And I wonder if that's going to trigger any sort of tsunami warning. That's the 6.5 right there. This is the 7.1. Really quite significant. So thanks for mentioning that. I didn't know that it happened while this live chat and this live stream was going on. So I guess I hit the timing perfectly. So if you have more questions, please ask them below. We'll go for a little bit longer, and then we'll sign off. And wishing you well and all that stuff. We have our day to go about, and just in general, I think this is all very much just a preview for the next 16, 30 months or so. Really big energies coming in rest of 2024 through 2026. Time speeding up or time skips due to the sun. My internal clock is feeling this. Time skips. I think we have an ability to control. We can definitely alter our perception of time. I mean, people in critical scenarios, they mention how time slows down. All of a sudden, we have the bandwidth to process time more. I think depending on your awareness and what you're doing, you can let time go very slowly, or it can speed up. And so a lot of people, it seems to me, get stuck in a trap of letting time speed up. But you have to build rest and calm and do things like build in some boringness where you're doing nothing. Nothing's occupying you. That will very quickly slow time back down. Now, as it relates to the time in the sun, I think this energy in general causes us to be a little bit more energized and maybe even frantic. And as a result, that can make time seem to speed up. But I'm no expert on that. Is it normal to feel like a helmet of energy on the head? Well, that would depend on your own kind of aura and system, what energies you're feeling there. But in general, at times, if you are having very strong activation of the crown chakra, you'll push energy out there. You can feel that, especially during a meditation or even while dreaming, laying down, sleeping. I felt that before. Also, though, for being truthful and looking at all the possibilities, a lot of entities attach the crown chakra. So that's something to also be aware of. And if that just seems to resonate with you, then that may be the case, and that's something to look into and to do a clearing purification to get your crown chakra freed up again. Thank you, Higher Vibrations. You've been here right from the beginning. You're the first comment, so thanks for staying this whole time. What do you suggest to guard against shedding? So she's talking about shedding from the virus and from all the different jabs and medicines that were offered. And I think the best thing you can do in general is to be aware of your air environment. And so, for example, like I've had this thing before. I went back home and my dad happened to be there. So it's like I was making sure the windows were open, right? Fresh air is key. So making sure windows are open. You're on the bus, there's a whole bunch of people, like pop the window open. You're on the subway, pop the window open. You may get some people like, what are you doing? Like, we keep these closed. It's like, we're opening up the windows. That's first and foremost. Then you would want to look at your detoxification pathways. And like, so a great one is dandelion. Just add dandelion, have dandelion tea every morning. If you drink coffee, add some dandelion to your coffee. That's a fantastic way to do that. And so that will just in general enhance your detoxification pathways. And then like you can also greatly reduce your inflammation and optimize your immunity and everything with breath work. And so that ties in with the fresh air, but making sure you're having good deep breathing and you're allowing your body to go into a parasympathetic state so it can rest and recharge and to deal with anything that's coming in foreign that your body doesn't like. Well, it can nip it in the bud, get it, excrete it, and it's gone. There are a whole bunch of different things that people recommend, these detoxification protocols, different herbs or things like methylene blue or like NAC plus or different like antioxidants. And so all you can use and research into all those, but I just in general, I'm pretty old school and keep it very simple. Utilize the things that everyone has access to, which is your lungs, simple herbs, and focusing on like air quality. Be willing to like open up the window, and if people stare at you on the bus, be fine. Be like, no, we're keeping the windows open. Like, didn't we learn anything from 2020, right? I have no problem doing that. So having sometimes confidence like that can get you off of the glutathione, for example. You don't need to spend $100 on glutathione for shedding. But there's a lot of different things. I feel pain and burning on the forehead. What does it mean? Well, in general, that would be like a head thing. And there is an interesting thing that I just kind of stumbled upon that seems that a lot of people are getting like psoriasis on their scalp after COVID happened. And that's actually an issue that I have. It's like certain spots here, I get like this kind of like this itchy, scaly stuff, where before I never had that. And it didn't click until someone mentioned the before and after. And I was like, yeah, that only triggered after COVID and I had the virus. And so my one friend, he was all for, this stuff. And he had this inflammatory growth come out of his nose. And he had to go to the hospital and they like lanced it out. But his body was trying to decharge it. Another friend of mine, right after she got her second one, she had this massive nosebleed, like the biggest effing nosebleed you've ever had in her life. Just like blood up. And I guess this massive clot came out too, like a slug, like out of her nose. And so we know that these things pass into the blood-brain barrier very easily, unfortunately, because they degrade the blood-brain barrier. Spike proteins, the S1 spike protein unit actually punctures that blood-brain barrier. One reason why a lot of people have chronic fatigue, more inflammation in the brain, this general area. And so there's active detoxification occurring as a result of that, whether it's through the nose or whether it's through the skin or the scalp. And I'm still trying to figure this one out. This seems to get exacerbated when I eat sugar or processed flours and also glyphosate. So I've been staying away from those, and that keeps it under control. Also, I use spring water on my hair instead of tap water. That greatly helps as well. But that I can't answer your entire question because there's a lot I don't know. Do you think these energies coming in are triggering COVID symptoms? I do. Yeah, I think all this stuff is very much linked to a lot of people have COVID symptoms because A, they have the virus, but B, also because now they have some of their cells producing spike proteins endogenously all the time. And so that can get ramped up when you have these energies, which can, it's really a devious thing. And so long COVID symptoms often will flare up. I've seen this with people very close to me when there are strong energy bursts, like they're near an earthquake. That's one example I have. Or there's a big geomagnetic storm. All of a sudden, they'll get super fatigued and bedridden for days because they get this flare up. And so their body kind of keeps under control. The immune system keeps under control. It's like trying to nip these cells, but they're dividing, and now you have this kind of conflict in the body. But then all of a sudden, when the immune system has to like look elsewhere and there's just too much energy flux coming in, all of a sudden you can get these things to proliferate, and you can get a big flood of spike proteins, which we know affect our vascular system, our heart, our lungs, our breathing, our blood pressure, inflammation, because they work with the ACE1 receptor, ACE1, ACE2, angiotensin, that whole system. I wrote an article on it way back in like 2021. It's one of the base systems as it relates to our autonomic nervous system and our ability to regulate our heart rate, our breathing, inflammation, and blood pressure. So you get that out of whack and everything goes downhill. So yeah, what happened back in 2020 and 2021 is one of the biggest crimes that's ever been committed, if not the biggest crime that's ever been committed. If we look at the absolute scale of it, and we're still collectively in denial of that. But that is true. What did I dream last night? I had a few dreams. I didn't write them down though because they weren't super significant. I write the ones that are significant down. But yeah, I don't remember last night's really. It wasn't anything special. But we didn't have the storm last night. With the storms, I've been having increased dream activity. A lot of people have as well. And yeah, Sherry is saying that your words will create your life. So it's important to be mindful of what we believe and what we're creating and everything. So as it relates to yourself, like you would want to, if your health and wellness or things can be improved, right, to switch the narrative to I am healing, like I let's say was sick, but I'm healing now. Like things are improving rather than, oh, I am depressed. Let's say you're depressed. I'm depressed. We'll keep that going forward. We're saying like, I'm feeling better. Doesn't mean that you have to be feeling much better, but just a little bit. Get that upward trajectory, start to change your life and perspective and everything by altering the actual words that you use. We call it spelling. Words and spelling, it's all spells. How we speak and what we say are all spells. Very powerful in our ability to manifest and control our reality. So yeah, that's it for today's live stream. I'm going to wrap up. Crazy that we had this 7.4 in Russia as the live stream is going during this geomagnetic storm. Perhaps there's a link there. I think there is because, the timing's quite perfect on that. But in general, you see that this whole area has been very active. And so the timeline was the 7.1 in Japan, and then it was these 6.5s here, 6.1 down there, some stuff in the Philippines as well, and now up here. So kind of like this ping pong game, going from here, 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 and then all around. So solar maximum will last until about 2026, 2027. Then it'll start to go down. Oh yeah, let's look at this Schumann resonance before we sign off to see if we see anything from this earthquake. 1210 is our time. That's my time. So I'll need to go forward 14 hours for the Schumann data. And so we can do that here. Thanks for all joining me today on this live stream. And so it's 12:10, we go forward 14 hours. That takes us to 2 o'clock right here. Let me step up over to this side. And we don't see any interesting waveforms that I see in our data out of Russia, which is fairly close to the epicenter of that earthquake. And again, that's because most of the energy was likely absorbed into the ocean and also the rock. The epicenter was 44 kilometers down. And so all that geology above it will absorb those emissions. And then you have the water at the top being that final catcher getting it. And so it's when you have these shallow earthquakes on land that you get these really strange emissions in the Schumann resonances. So we're not seeing that right now. Is it G4 currently? Is our storm a G4? No, it's a G3. And actually it's starting to ramp down. So we just hit G3, but now we're ramping back down, and we are with our HP30 index now to a 3.33. So yeah, big, what a crazy Saturday it's been. Hope you're all feeling well. Again, just, drink water, breath work, grounding, earthing. I talk about this stuff all the time. Lay off the stimulants, embrace things and use things like CBD, vetiver, St. John's wort, our herbal allies, dandelion, very grounding, potatoes, go team potato. You can roast them, mash them, stick them in stew. You can do everything. Thank you, Susan, for the super thanks. You are appreciated as well. Those are all good strategies for you. And I'm going to sign off now because I'm going to myself rest and relax and do some earthing with this storm. So